Hi again, and welcome back. In the opening reflection, remember on the invitation to draw out the essential highlights of Gangadean's life and journey over 60 years as a first philosopher and opening up the space of global philosophy. I was asked how, if we had to produce a video of Gangadean's contributions to the human enterprise, what would go into it? What would it sound like? And so, as an experiment, I took it up because it was interesting. It's as if, given everything that I've been working on in terms of entering a global space and in quest of the missing code of logos, the ultimate ground floor of being itself, of reality, and listening and living through the great first thinkers of the ages, scriptures and wisdom enlightenment teachers, great brilliant philosophers, men and women, scientists and others, great mathematicians, the highest voices, creativity, not just in verbal form, but in creative form, in all forms, art. Listening to those voices over decades and living in these different traditions, you've got to live in them, in the biblical tradition. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, all through the centuries, the great thinkers who are attempting to make this real to the people in our religious forms of life. And our great philosophical thinkers, brilliant minds, seeking to articulate and get to the foundation, the code, the ground of rational light, of reason, of being, of what is first. So, given that my life has been in that space, and given what I brought out in the first opening episode, it turns out to be a trailer, because what was interesting in the experiment is, can I step back from Ashok and in a posthumous voice, I'm not here, in a posthumous voice, what would someone who really understood Gangadean's work, how would she locate it vis-a-vis the evolution of prior thinkers and philosophers and first philosophies, since Gangadean alleges to have opened up and entered into a deeper global space that's unprecedented in making the hidden code shift, the language, the logic, the mind operating system of wisdom to get to first philosophy, to open up that deeper space, allegedly. And so it was clear in speaking of, now we can have source science, if we can get to the source. If we do, in fact, indeed have a deeper access to the missing and long emerging logos code, the code of what is first, by whatever name we use. Allah, Yahweh, God, Brahman, Shunyata, Buddha nature, Great Spirit, guys, whatever name, for the infinite first. If we are able to truly be gifted, because you can't hack it, it's got to be gifted, the technology of a deeper access and intimacy with the source, that would be a supreme game changer for the human enterprise that we've never seen before, and long coming. And so those themes came out in the first trailer because there's so many headlines that were summed up from this posthumous voice. Gangadean's not here, but what would a competent, qualified narrator, what would she say about this alleged crossing into a deeper evolutionary space of being human and deeper access and intimacy with the source of being, of reality, of the Sophia sphere, the Logosophia? What allegedly would happen? Because in the opening trailer, we spoke about the end of silos, that anyone who conscientiously goes through the great teachings all the great lineages that we have now available that we didn't have before during the evolution of our public space of discourse and translations and access to different traditions of philosophy and wisdom and scriptures over the past 2,500 years, including hidden discovered Nag Hammadi texts, for example, and Gospel of Thomas and so forth. If the silos is already a symptom of the separation and fragmentation of a derivative code, if we gain access to the logos, a deeper access to the logos code, and since it's infinite, it's infinitely deep. You don't end it. It's ever deeper, infinitely ever deeper. But if we gain deeper access than we've had before, and broke out of the siloing, because it's clear that that's almost scandalous when you begin to reflect on what is infinite, the source. Being infinite, it's infinitely one. And if it's infinitely one, it cannot be scattered or broken or hacked or siloed. And it's not Lego separate pieces, narrative pieces, or pieces of words or names or mind bites or thoughts, sentences, narratives, worldviews, belief systems that are broken. That's a silo. If we do, as in the first session we saw, that Gangadean's life and quest by living in the great first narratives and actually entering into them to bring them to life. You read Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy, really, as an attempt to really cross into the logos, meditative, and stepping back from more derivative forms that are under doubt and opinionated and not really grounded in irrevocable truth. In our postmodern age now, in the 21st century, allegedly, it's the end of philosophy as we've known it. The end of foundations, the end of looking that the modernism is gone. Allegedly, modernism being the caricature that we hold these truths to be self-evident. That human reason can give us truth, and self-evident truth, and absolute truth deeper than any ethnicity or tradition or culture or human condition for all humans. That's all allegedly the dream of modernism, going back from Plato, Socrates, Aristotle in the West, but to the Vedic science of yoga and the science of Brahman and Buddha, the science, the enlightenment of Buddha, for example, just to give examples. If that's modernism, it's gone in the postmodern skeptical age. But we'll have to think about, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So everything's at stake. If the first opening trailer is right, and finally with the deeper access to the code of Sophia Logos, because we can stop siloing, because the siloing is itself a code, an effect of a deeper derivative code that fragments and silos. And to silo is to silence the logos, is to eclipse it and consign it to the background out of sight. To silo the infinite in any form, any first narrative, if it's self-siloing, it's in itself deconstructing in a way. Why? Because what we saw in the first opening trailer is that once you realize, listening to the great teachers and scriptures, that the infinite is infinitely one, it cannot not be, and they cannot be multiplied. The profound transformative insights flow from that simple axiom that being is infinite, it's infinitely one. It's beyond the possibility of being divided, it cannot be hacked. And in order to encounter it competently and with proper literacy, we need to be gifted the code of logos, the form of all forms, the language of all language, the infinite word, the ground of meaning and truth, the moral law, the foundation of knowing, and being human. Who are we? So that all came out in the opening, and I'd like to just pick it up and continue in this experiment to be almost posthumous, to help the prospective reviewer who's going to now narrate the accomplishment and contributions of Gangadean in his life work. And so if we do allegedly have finally a deeper access to what so many great thinkers dreamt of, like Descartes, to get to the foundation of science, the science of science, and Plato, to tap the logos in the light of reason, which is wisdom, enlightenment of reason, the rational light, that we will have deeper than knowledge. We would be in the light of wisdom, the deepest form of knowing. This quest has been east and west, north and south, for centuries, to get to the foundation of knowledge and truth and science and the light of reason. So in the opening, I'm taking a moment to reflect and call back some of those themes. What's the point of moving forward in this attempt to be in a posthumous voice to help a prospective narrator? Because it can't be narrated in a derivative space. That's the point. So in the hologram that I presented is behind me. We left off at the end of the first opening inaugural reflection and seeing that the code markers to understand where we are, the red lines marked the single bracket code to mark out for the first time that, as ever before, this level of reason, knowledge, language, truth, being human, speaking, cultures, disciplines, all of the vast diversity in this technology. You might call it Google space, information space, where it's a magnificent development in our human journey to harness the logos, the infinite space, which is now the double markers. The double parentheses is a code of the ground floor of logos. And the single markers we saw this was introduced. We never had the code markers this way before. To see, oh, where are you? Whence are you speaking? Who is speaking? What narration is going on? In what mind operating process? Which is what this means. What is the software of the human being, of a culture, in a rational space, in language, in a hermeneutical process of interpreting reality and rendering reality here within this space, embedded within this code, which by its nature is going to cause this gesture of eclipsing access from here to there into the ground floor of being. And we can call this Google space, information space, representational language, the power of science here to represent and picture. And for us to also have our emotions and feelings and body language and music and all the arts, all of that's going on in this space. And so the age of conflation is when we didn't have this. When we were embedded in this space, without codes, without markers, we couldn't see clearly that we are using and being used by this software, this logic, this grammar, this version of reason and interpretation of language, of making sense, of experience, of the empirical, of what appears to us, all going on. And if we're not aware, if we're not able to mind our minding, step back from here and critically say, well, can we see the software and become aware, given the effects we're having? How do you do that? Well, you need the code. Ironically, you need access to the code in order to see the code. This code is not able to see itself in itself. It's not self-sustaining. That's why it's situated within the Sophia sphere, the logosphere, the source code. The logos code is the ground, the infinite, infinitely unum. All the diversity and plurality cannot be broken outside. You can't go outside of the infinite. If you were to have an item out here, it would other the infinite, and therefore it would not be infinite. So the grammar and logic of the infinite suggests that nothing can be without being. The infinite is being, infinite being. And nothing can be without being, outside of being. And so the journey of our human evolution from where we are in our place of language and reflection and inquiry and science and first philosophy, and narratives and creative arts and all of the genius of the human factor going on in this conflated space where we couldn't see the hologram. Oh, there's a deeper way to think, a deeper way to be human, a deeper way to have culture, a deeper way to know, a deeper way to worship, a way to enter well-being, a deeper way to heal, to end the suffering. That apparently our great first teachers and scriptures have been saying, if you are embedded in this, within this space, and not able to surrender, let it go, detach, step back, all of these metaphors of detachment and separation, and you almost have to die before you die in order to live and to cross from this form of life into the primary form of life, allegedly. So how you can't narrate if Gangadean's work as a first philosopher, and again what we said in the first, it's not Gangadean as an individual that is bringing this breakthrough to a deeper intimacy with the source and source science and sourceology, and to see and to end the conflation. So the narration of this hologram can't go on here. It's got to go on. The narrator has to speak from here. Well, that's a posthumous voice. Posthumous in the sense of this is where we are in our incarnated culture within that software. Then this voice, this historian, this narrator, reflector cannot really render this story, his story, the Logos story, within this pre-Logos subtext. So that's really what our experiment is. So how to get the story of the breakthrough into this space and to end the conflation of not seeing the code shift and to being logic within code chaos. That's what conflation means. The conflation of a code means you don't have this. If you just erased all of this and just go right into where we are in our everyday discourse, and even our refined discourse of our great thinkers and philosophers and scriptures and wisdom teachings. If there was code chaos and therefore the conflation of the codes, the code chaos of not knowing when. So if God speaks and we download it here, or if, say, Buddha or Christ or Krishna speaks to our condition, and we auto download it into our translated and lost in translation. This is lost in translation here. If scripture is the word of Logos, the source word, speaking and calling us, because the infinite, this is the infinite force of being, of let there be light, of evolution itself, of cosmos. Isn't this called cosmology? This is ontology, being, the science of being. So to tap source science, if this is science here, and this is the derivative form of science, great as it is, science is great. Medical science is great. Psychological, medical diagnostic of helping humans, all of the different self-help wisdom teachings, trying to understand how do we end the emptiness, the nihilism, suicide ideation, violence of all kinds, sexism, racism, homophobia, genocide, xenophobia, the degradation of nature, the objectification of each other, the breakdown of our political space, all of that in the conflation. So the narrator, the qualified narrator who's going to really speak of the missing story, this story, not the story as it's understood within this software of talking about the information, but realizing that the end of conflation and the manifesting of a code hologram to see that the source word and the logic and grammar and software of this infinite unifying, the unum principle, the unum axiom, cannot be broken. You cannot hack it. It can't be hacked. It's a grace to be able to see this, when Descartes said, I'm stepping back, in effect, when you see the code, in effect, he was seeking to step back from the cultural space that he was in, the rational space that he was in, even as a gifted mathematician, and having a logic and mathematics and what we thought was a priori truth. He saw that it could all be doubted. Why? Because it was cut off. It was a separation of the knower from the known. It was content. It was objectified. That's a silo maker. That's a Lego space. And so when he said, I'm stepping back in his meditations on first philosophy, the quest for what is first, excuse me, the I am was a stunning moment, and he didn't have the code clarity. It was in code chaos. How do you do that as a pioneer? Say, I am. Where are you? I am here in this Google space? Or was he stepping back from this? Well, once you have the codes, well, the meditative turn, the call of Krishna to Arjuna in the Gita, who's broken down in suffering and existential crisis. Krishna is calling him to Om. And that's the technology of how do you go from pre-yoga to yoga. Yoga is exactly the technology of seeing this, detaching from it, and learning to rehabilitate the mind in the space of Brahman, space of God. That's all Christianity. Christ end the sin and sacrifice to help humans, for whatever reason, in the alienated, cut off from God, from source, from Yahweh, to enter into the Christ word, as the logos in the flesh. If Christ is speaking from here, and that is pure logos script, and we're downloading it here, then Christianity here is not Christianity. And the 2,000 years of amazing developments of Christology, of trying to Christology, the logos of Christ, to understand the voice of Christ, the script of Christ. And scripture, is scripture here? Or is it a deeper script that we must open up to the word of God, the word of Logos, the source word? In the end of the age of conflation, that was a theme that came out of the Gangadean story, but it was not about Gangadean, because what was brought out, and this is extremely important, that to enter into this script is to be intimate with Logos, and intimate with Logos means you're with all of the great first responders of the ages in this space. It's not an individual who is seeing this. It's the posthumous voice, the voice of the self of first philosophy, the I am voice, is not a loner. It's not solo. It's a polis. Why? And as I said in the Gangadean story, Gangadean really, by living through the great first narratives and scriptures and philosophers, East and West and other, and seeking to bring those scripts to life, it became evident once you break the silo separation of these great narratives, then finally you can see the end of conflation with the code. So the greatest story not yet told, just to make that, what's the greatest story? This. Why is it greatest? The source of being, the Logosophia, by whatever name of the infinite, the Yahweh, the Allah, the Brahman, Shunyata, the Buddha nature, whatever name we use, the Great Spirit, the Geist. Right? It's deeper than we think. Thinking here is not yet capacitated to have meditative intelligence, to surf it, because the language here is not representation talking about it, it's presentational, it's revelatory. When Descartes said, I am, he was amming. Zen, the language of Zen, is in the zone. It is manifesting by the thinking to participate in this grammar, in the de-conflation. To participate in this grammar is to make it real, by thinking in this sense, in the source code. So source science is perhaps the greatest scientific breakthrough. As you see, that as great as our sciences here are many different sciences, and it's a work in progress to go from Newton to Einstein and beyond Einstein, for example, to go from Darwin to beyond Darwin, and the various narratives, to go beyond genetics to epigenetics, to keep moving the paradigm shifts in the lenses of different narratives of empirical world to make sense from the the geocentric to the heliocentric. When you have a paradigm, Copernican revolution, so you have all kinds of revolutions going on. That's great, but they're in the same code. They're in conflated space. So it's really a daring thing to say that if we can listen to our great first scriptures and teachers, not within the conflation and silo separations, but to see that they're tapping the logos. 1776, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we're endowed by God's nature, nature's God, source, with unalienable rights, life, liberty, well-being, here, being. In other words, it's a call to be a human, demos, the people, we the people. In this space, if we try to be we the people here, in this technology, in the conflation, you're going to get scattered, broken narratives and narcissistic, solipsistic, broken, polar, raw, postmodern, multiple opinions. And where is the truth? It's a crisis of truth. So here, if we're in a postmodern age of boundless, pluralistic, silo narratives, that each has their own belief system and worldviews and truths, because meaning and truth is a function of your worldview and your belief system. And there are many different perspectives, and they're all scattered in silos and Lego mental fragments, really. What happens if we can overcome the silo maker, the shredder, that shreds everything? Great as we are, as creative artists and spiritual people and visionaries and so forth, we can speak of conscious evolution. But what does that mean? It's not becoming aware of evolution here, but you see, this is the evolutionary drama. We see a moment of choice. Is it choice within here? In a conflated, captured options within Google space? Or is it the choice to see we can change the software of the mind as Buddha in the third axiom of choice of his Four Noble Truths? Buddha saw the axiom of choice. What is a choice? It's a choice. You can be here or you can be here. We have a choice. We can go from like as if the caterpillar to the butterfly, the ego pillar to the Buddha fly. We have a choice in how we use our minds. We can remain conflated and not even know it. We can remain embedded within the software here and not even pay attention, and to see that this is having profound effects in generating human suffering. That echoes across the teachers. So first, philosophy is not a silo narrative here. The consensus of our great scriptures and first thinkers in all of their diversity, once you see the unum axiom, the infinite logos, there's no narrative, can be without the logos word. The infinite word is the ground of all words. The infinite script is the ground of all scripts. The infinite logos code logic is the logic of all logics. Mathematical logic, cyber logic, all the different logics, that meditative logics, all of our teachings in the age of code conflation are in that respect compromised, and they've been siloed. We say the Vedic sciences, yoga is over there, Socrates and classical Greek thought is over here, Vedic science is over here, Buddha speaks over here, Zen is over there, Tibetan, Chinese Chan, Japanese Zen, African wisdom, feminist wisdom, the wisdom of science, they're all in their silo conflation. So to allege that there is the greatest story never told, let's finish that theme. Why is this the greatest? Because the infinite source, the sound, the ground of all being, reality. We don't have to use God talk. Being is the source of all. And being infinite is infinitely one. And being infinitely one, we cannot have silos scattered as a ground floor. That's artificial intelligence. There are many forms of artificial intelligence. AI is a very popular topic right now about artificial intelligence. And it could be that all intelligence in this place is AI is just one of the forms of artificial intelligence, because when you get organic, unum, when you get to the unum, you get unum organic intelligence. And in the great wisdom traditions, and this is what Gangadean was bringing out with the great teachers. That's the point I'm trying to bring out. It's not Gangadean acting as a loner, making this up as one of the narratives within the conflation space. Gangadean was seeking to stand on the shoulders, so to speak, and the wings and voices and narratives of our great scriptures and teachers of the ages, such as we know them so far, and to listen deeply and to see that they're all questing as first responders for getting to the Sophia, the Logosophia, and why that must be so. And to listen with that in that form of sensitivity, that it's unum, all of these different and then to hear and see the emerging consensus. Still inhibited by the conflation, but now you can see it more clearly. Why these diverse, great first narratives, and we're together. It's a community. That's Gangadean. If you're going to focus on Gangadean, if you're going to have a posthumous voice, it's not a single bracket narrative here. It's the attempt to really narrate from here, along in the consensus voice of all of our great first teachers, with Logos and the intimacy of Logos, because when you cross from here to there, you move from I, it. The other is an it, an object. It's objectifying. And we'll see that that is deeply involved in the scattering of the human energies into pathological culture. Culture itself here, in the conflation age, is compromised. And the deep quest of first healers, first thinkers, scriptures, and wisdom teachers and enlightenment is to somehow see their suffering going on in existence here, not being, but existence. And we want to end that the wisdom, the whole point of it is medical. It's so source science is medical ontology. And it's not a single voice narrator here. It is tapping the consensus wisdom of all of our great, but that's not even why it's true. It's not that, the Buddha and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad and Plato and Descartes, Spinoza, Hegel and Kant and Nagarjuna and all of these great geniuses of the ages, they said it, and therefore it's true now. We're facing something much more powerful, that once you begin to see the simple power that the infinite is infinitely one. And from that, what does it mean? It means infinite presence. You cannot make it an object. You can't objectify God, Logos, Sophia. You can't make it an object. You can't name it here. This language is not capable. It doesn't have the capacity to handle the voltage of the Logos word, the Sophia word, the Om, the Tao, the Brahman, Allah, Yahweh, all of the authentic names of what is first. And since it's infinite, it's infinitely unum. And if it's unum, it's pluribus. It's not first you have unity and then multiplicity, but the infinite already has a capacity for boundless infinite plurality, but never broken into separate, but always interlinked and interlaced in the fractal power of a point in the logosphere. It's a different logic. It's a different science, source science. It's unum. It's the unum axiom. And unum heals. To be scattered and broken by this and shattered and shredded in our lives, in our psyche, in our human relations, in our culture making, in our worship, in our scientific knowing, in our medical diagnostic, in this compromised space, in the conflated chaos of the code chaos. The healing power, the great teacher saw this arrow as a vector showing how do we go from a derivative into the primary source code. From the software here, which shreds and fragments and objectifies. And what we'll see in a sequel, I'm building up to this, that's why I'm saying that so far it's been a trailer, because if I'm going to be honest and thorough and integral in advising a prospective narrator of what did Gangadean find in his life, and how do we understand it, and what space do we need to go to understand the greatest story never told? Why is it the great? Because nothing can be greater than the infinite source, by whatever name. It's infinite value. It's infinite source. It's source of meaning. That's why it's the greatest. It's goodness itself. As Plato saw, logos is goodness, or the biblical for God is good. God is goodness. It's not an information about God, but God be good. Why? Because it connects and unamizes all that is held together in an orchestrated flow, a musical flow of a celestial connectivity or a fractal flow of being in the zone. This nirvana. Heaven is here. Heaven, nirvana is here. Why? Because even though somehow we humans are doing the cutting and the artificial intelligence and the artificial living in this pre-organic, pre-unum space, duped by our software that we haven't seen in our journey to really become whole beings and persons. It takes code competence to love. It takes literacy to have emotional intelligence. It takes literacy and de-conflation to be a citizen, to be an officer, to be a person, to be a mensch. What's a person? It's an officer of source, an officer of logos. Why? Because we're logos kids. It's very simple, actually. Once you de-conflate, it's the journey of our humanity from a derivative space in the age of conflation. Imagine if that's over. If finally we saw what Buddha was calling, what Jesus was modeling, what Krishna was instructing, what Socrates was saying, leave the cave of appearance and ignorance and enter into the logos. All of that. If we can really see, oh, we were doing it, trying to do it here, but now we can see this, that would be source science. The science of science. Now we've got the ground foundation of knowledge. And the postmodern skepticism that there is no foundation, there is no ground. There is no unity. There's only diverse alterity and multiplicity of local perspectives. There's no God's eye view. Okay, it's not God's eye view. It's human eyes with rational intelligence, tapping the source of reason and who we are. Who am I? Here or here? We're the human family. What does it mean to be human? A Lego Google entity, a unit is in the ASA space of separate units and atoms, allegedly self-existing. Is that who we are? Or could it be that as Logos sapiens with the light of reason, our destination and our destiny is to mature into the foundation of rational light and rational life in the end of the age of conflation. So that's a very daring thing to allege. But it must be said because the greatest story can't be told. So why, when Gangadean said this breakthrough of the end of conflation and access to the Logos code and to see that the Logos logic emblemized with markers that we never had before, the single bracket markers to work this level of being human and culture and language and the maturation to the source that was making this possible in wholeness, to open it up and to understand this logic, excuse me, this language, this way of being a human. Human here or human here. And this human is a person. She's an officer in the I-thou space. The pronoun I am is an I-thou pronoun. Because you can't break away from the source. Pronominalization here is not the same as here, as a separate alleged. I'm referring to me as a Google narrative, my CB. Excuse me. I obviously get passionate when seeking to assist this would-be narrator of how would you speak of the greatest story of the Gangadean's bravado and daring to say the greatest story never told, and to say that our human journey has been lodged in the age of conflation, code chaos, and we're suffering from that. And our greatest efforts of wisdom and best-selling authors and all of the books, if we receive it and exchange it within this political space of reason and language, then it remains behind the walls, the intramural walls, and is not able to really with a code shift to see this is where wisdom is. If you want to have the power of now, then now or now. What is time here? Double bracket time. It's not the same as time here. Every word, that's the point we made last time. Every word in this language, mark it out with it. It's not just a quotation mark. We need a new word. It's a codation. Let's play with this. This is codation. When I speak and I do this, it's just a signal of this code. And when I do that, I'm speaking of this code. So if I say a word, it's not just a quotation mark, because we have quotation marks here, but it's a codation. We haven't had that clearly. When Jesus is speaking in the source code, allegedly, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That's not the same logic and language when the Logos is speaking, allegedly, but when you're speaking in this form of the human form of reason, the download of a rational, capital R reason here, and reason here. And discourse and language and meaning and truth and science and knowledge and creativity and all of this and ethics, everything, all of this and wisdom and self-help and medical diagnostic, all of that. But this diagnostic source, the opening up of source science, unimaginable. And yet this is what thinkers like Descartes and Buddha and Krishna, who speaks of the fire of knowledge will burn away the kleshas and poisons of the ego-mental, ego-based, separate atomic, separate entity Arjuna, the human beings here, and the samsara, and the sorrow. So whether you call it sin or samsara, or can combine the word to sinsara, it's an ontological designation. Ontology, again, is the science of being. And since it's the science of all science, then psychology, our psychological brilliant narratives here are still derivative. I can have a narration about what's suicidal ideation, what is attention deficit, what is bipolar disorders, what is the schizophrenic problem, what is nihilism and depression, and what is the angst in the face of death, and what does death mean here, what does it mean here? If this form of life is derivative, and this is double bracket life, is the life that Jesus, for example, was teaching, I am the life. And Krishna, this is the life, the awakened self. Socrates, leave the embodied privileging of the senses and coming into the Logos and crossing as he's about to drink the hemlock and be executed, I will be with the teachers, I will be with in the Logos. Right? That echoes through the ages of all great first wisdom teachers, somewhere together in that community of voices. And again, what makes this compelling, the breakthrough to source science, is not that the fact that our great wisdom teachers were moving in this direction. That's not it. They were moving in this direction because this holds, this sustains. You can't get around the foundation of knowledge and truth and being. You can't fake it, you can't hack it. It's through deep love and devotion that one will be gifted the code shift to see it and to therefore reorient from here to here. And imagine then source medical. If source science is the science of all science, this is the diagnostic of the unum power, the Logos code, when it diagnoses the human situations and pathologies and dysfunctions. It's not using this form of diagnosis. It's a deeper diagnostic from ontology. So the ailment seen from source medical, it's medical ontology. Source science is a new science, and it has a diagnostic power to allow us to see, as Buddha was saying, this is suffering. Existential suffering. I mean, the culture itself, or Krishnamurti is saying, to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is not the measure of health. Ontological hygiene. It's almost a pun of hygienes. Low genes are hygienes. And the genetic maturation of who we are. This is who we are, according to our great first teachers in source science, in the end of the age of conflation. So to dare to say that Gangadean, in seeking to bring out the code markers as never before, and to therefore, in the consensus of the power of the Logos, first philosophy and first wisdom, that our wisdom, traditions, and enlightenment and scriptures are connected profoundly by our great first responders. And that, speaking in that voice, you begin to see the hologram of the journey that we have not seen before. And the greatest story. Why? Because we're suffering here and it's not sustainable. And many people feel on the planet now, with all of the wars and breakdowns and that's going on, say in the American political scene, post-truth, different truths. What's a lie for one is truth for the other, so to speak. In a multipolar narratives of a multicultural society, or the Middle East, the chronic breakdown, or in Russia, Ukraine, what's happening in Northern Ireland, all around African conflicts, all across the planet. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look promising. It looks as though we're in a systemic self-implosion. It's almost as if to not face this conflated condition and to understand the shredder that we're in, the shredding code that puts everything in silos, and including our own psychology and our psyche and our life and our well-being. You can't have well-being in the shredder, an objectifier. It's going to generate all kinds of objectification results, and you begin to see a deeper medical diagnostic from here of breakdowns across the culture. And that's why I need to somehow assist this prospective narrator of what are the highlights of Gangadean's life work and the breakthrough, daring to suggest a source science that we never had before, but we dreamt of all through the ages and allegedly spoke from in some of our first wisdom teachings and enlightenments. And now we have a medical ontology, to have a medical ontological science to diagnose the ontological ailments. So what greater psychology and psychiatry, I mean, diagnostic, the breakdowns in the human psyche and neurotic psychotic behaviors and so forth, and suicidal thinking and violence and all the forms of sexism, racism, homophobia, genocides, and forms of violence, and the dream of a non-violent society. It's not going to be solved here. It must go to non-violence in the place of truth, in the I-thou intelligence, where you realize you're living in presence. From leaving here, which is absence, it's AWOL, it's absent from presence. If being is infinite, then it's infinitely present. Not present in the sense of past, present, and future, but presence. To be human is to be mindful, to be heads up, Zen, presence, to zone it, to surf it, to be realizing you're in sacred space. This is desecrated. Our temples and worship here in the conflated is somehow, to the extent that we're eclipsed systemically, the system itself, the system of discourse and language and reason and thought and culture making and the lens we're using in all of our narratives, and all great as it is, potentially, is being called to somehow outgrow this obsolescence, this obsolete stage of literacy and language and reason, and mature into an integral whole person, a broken fragment, and that's why it hurts. In other words, what becomes clear in source medical ontology, from an ontological medical science, that we didn't have before, is with the holistic lens, the double bracket lens, is to see why the life here in our everyday human condition, the human condition here, is intrinsically broken and scattered and fragmented in the shredder, the source shredder. And we can't hack our way out of that space. This code doesn't have the capacity to liberate the people into primary beings, first persons. officers of the source, officers of Sophia, philosophia, lover of Sophia. Sophia is here. And that's presence. So to enter into presence is to be awakened, mindful, and rational, and that's a journey of a rational being. So Buddha's enlightenment was a model, for example. What is enlightenment? Being attuned to the flow and surfing the infinite, compassionate, interwoven flow of the space-time mind-word continuum, the I-thou continuum of compassion and feeling, the connectivity of being when we tap the home base. And that's why Jesus, as a pioneer, for example, said, love your enemy. And what is wealth? And do we live by bread alone? Or do we thrive through the word of source as food, holy food, organic food, unam food, soul food, mind food? So this is huge. And so now, could it be, and obviously I need to do a sequel, because in my posthumous reflection from here, with our great community of first responders, and supported and standing with them, men and women of the ages and the scriptures, now that we don't have it in separate silos and we can see the unum connectivity, because obviously in profound deep dialogue, we begin to see from this space of the I-thou life and the I-it life that objectification is very much at the core of being cut off from life. So to go from life here, which is derivative in AI, to organic, whole life, integral life, source life, intimacy with source, which is scary. How dare you allege to be intimate with the source, ontologically? And yet, if we're Logos kids and we're born of this, if we're children of God, if there's Christ in everyone, if there's Om in everyone, if there's God in everyone, these keep echoing. These bits of eclectic pieces of information. Here it's fragmented in the age of conflation. So the theme that was there first is if the age of conflation is over, and just pause a moment to think about this. We have so many, in postmodern culture, now especially, we have so many different narratives of the end of history. Well, because this history is not the same as, but this history is, who is the historian and what is her voice? In which ethnic orientation and lens is the historian who is rendering the story? And her story, that pun, for example, the Americans celebrating Columbus Day, but how about the indigenous people? Do they celebrate that? For example, whose history or whose lens is being used? And if it's the end of history, there is no one, so postmodern culture said there is no one fundamental narrative. There is no foundation. Give up on that. There is no universal light of reason. That's modernism. There's no higher perspective. We're always in a local perspective. We're always in a situated, that's the only truth we can have. This is it, folks. And in a way, all the history of mysticism is the mystic who is beginning to see that language, representational language and thinking and discursive reason and thought, single bracket reason, right, is just highly limited and can't get to the truth. The truth, as I see it, says a mystic, allegedly, in conflated mysticism, is that reality cannot be put into words. Love cannot be put into words. What is higher, truth, is beyond words. Words are essentially dualistic, representational. There are no deeper words. There's no language we hear. And we must be silent. That's why Wittgenstein ended, when he did the logical investigation of his Tractatus, he ends with that infamous remark, woran man nicht sprechen kann, darüber muss man schweigen. Wherever you cannot speak, you must be silent. That's the voice of a kind of mystic, saying that truth is beyond speech and reason and knowledge as we know it. Whereas the great first teachers are saying, no, this form of reason and language and speech is limited. And we can, as Wittgenstein came back to show there are many different language games. There are many forms of logics. But he didn't show that there's an unum logic that allows diversity of logics and language forms, many different forms of speech acts and mind acts and performance in the richness of language is deeper than we thought. And it is. The infinite word is infinitely deep, and the language games that are possible within this space. So we do need we've spent time reflecting on the first opening narrative, or what does it mean to be the end of the age of conflation? So all of this talk about the end times, even in the biblical narrative, the end times of eschatology. We're living in the end. The end is near. And the Christ will appear, come, at the end of age. A new age begins, right? There's a lot of talk in the air about new age. We're in the new age, or the axial age, when humans began to develop wisdom in a new way in the early Greek and early forms of wisdom. The axial, we enter the axial age, and some say we're now in the second axial age, or the Mayan calendar of 2012, after 25,000 years, finally there will be a rise in consciousness to a new level of consciousness. We hear that. Now let's go to a different dimension. We hear that in the conflated narration. But when we step back into source space and source science and deep ontology, it's clear why, if indeed the software that dominates our human condition at this point, existentially, our existence here, is shredded and scattered and postmodern in a way. In a way, postmodern is bringing out a diagnostic, ironically, of alterity, of the profoundly diverse alterity. It's not unity that's primary, it's the other. It's not one, it's the other. And yet we get writings like Levinas, totality and infinity. Or Hegel, Geist, Wissenschaft. But Geist is moving history. And the dialectic of human journey is to enter into the Geist. For example, we hear that. It's all of Vedic science and to enter into Brahman. It's all of the Buddha, the enter into the Buddha sphere. Shunyata, emptiness, it's empty of this. There are no pieces and fragments and Lego pieces in the Buddha space. These are artificial constructs of the shredder mind that's living a kind of derivative, artificial adolescent form of reason and language and life and being and existence in separate shards and pieces that we don't realize that we're in a shredder. That eclipses a deeper access to being primary beings, first persons. First science opens a way to a portal to presence. And if we end the conflation with the code intelligence, we can see that presence is our journey and maturation is human. Zen philosophy, being mindful, as Buddha, as yoga, for example. Being mindful is being full. And to be unmindful is as if you're sleeping in the space of being and you're not really, you're in the cave, and you're not flourishing and you're turning on the lights. Of being a person in sacred space. It's all sacred. Nature is sacred. The earth is a house of God. I shall dwell in the house of earth. Single bracket earth is not the same as double bracket earth. Single bracket space is where space and time and cause and substance and quality, figure, quality. This is all pieces, but when you go into a PowerPoint here, it's all connected. It's fractal. Every point is center in the pluralistic universe. And to be a human being here is profoundly deep in your individuality and uniqueness. You don't lose. The unum doesn't melt down your uniqueness and sacredness as a person. Au contraire. To step into this field of infinite plurality, a space is held by every person in every snowflake, every grain of sand. In this field, the infinite pluribus is still on. You've got your space, but you're not cut off. You're connected. The I is I, thou meaning the other. So much energy has been going into what form of otherness? The I, it, other, the single bracket other, I facing the other, and human relations here. Single bracket relations are not double bracket relationality. And if love is a relation, that I love you. You are there, I am here, I, it, objectification is not the space of meeting. As Buber says, I, it, and I, thou. Monologue or dialogue. That's a dialogue culture that awaits us. That's nonviolent. USA here, USA here. Democracy or democracy. Mental health, great as psychiatry, psychotherapy, and the narratives of self-help in the psychological analysis and diagnosis of human ill-being, right, has to review itself in the light of ontology of being. Because if our being is eclipsed and our being is broken, we can't fix it here. And psychopharmaceuticals are not going to fix the shift in our mental operating process. That's the call of our great wisdom teachers. The mind operating process. If we're living in a software that has malware in that we didn't see, and it's causing the fallout of brokenness and fragmentation and all forms of pathological ill-being, that the culture itself is ill to have culture here. And therefore, every aspect of the culture is going to show the illness, which is what? Separation from the unam. That's what source medical ontology. If there's an ultimate breakthrough in medicine, it's medical ontology. If there's an ultimate breakthrough in science, it's source science. It's unam science, the unam axiom. And to get the unam axiom, you need the code shift. And to get that, you have to stop the conflation. And to stop that, you've got to see that where we are and mind our minding and realize we have a choice in rehabilitating our mind operating intelligence with a higher integral code from AI to organic. That's a lot. So let this be a second deepening, hopefully, from a posthumous voice in what is turning out to be an unfolding series. It needs to be. We need to have sequels to the opening reflection, advice to the narrator of the journey to the source and the greatest story never told. I hope it's clear why it's never told. Because we're great at telling here. We tell stories. We have gospels. Bring the news. We're great in the news, even though we're now complaining that there's misinformation. And information is disinformation. Because what is information? Because logos is the form. Sophia is the form, formation. The human being here is well formed. She's well formed as an I, thou being in a primary being. But here we're somehow malformed. And information, language, representational scripting, news. And even though we have all the different news media now and social media, we didn't have it before with the computer, but that's been going on in a more local micro form all through the centuries. We've been living in the Google space for centuries. Information and disinformation and misinformation. How do we get truth? Where is truth? If American culture, for example, are we post-truth, or is there any knowledge? It's not even just, is there God real, or one nation under God? Because God is not the same as God. God is global. Allah is global. Yahweh is global. Brahman is global. Om Tao, Shunyata is global. That means source all. Unit, unam, is the unam axiom. And ironically, in the USA mantra, e pluribus unum, e pluribus unum, pluribus unum, one nation under God, indivisible. No, it's divided, it's shredded. Check it out. And we can have many different pundits saying, what's wrong with America? We have to, democracy is on the ballot. But what if 1776 was tapping here? Self-evident truths of life, liberty, well-being. And if the Logos was calling us to form a democracy in the holy experiment. What's the holy experiment? This. not this. So there's a lot to follow with in trying to pick out the headlines in what came through Gangadean's life work. And I'll pause and stop here. And if you're staying with me and you had the first opening inaugural part one, this will be part two. But it's obvious I need to say more. And I will share from this voice, from this standing here, not here, but to say, how do we understand the human journey and the human condition? And at the end of the age of conflation, with this now we can see more clearly, with this hologram, we can see, wow, is it true that we're in age of conflation where we didn't have a code markers and it was vital to get the code shift? And now we see, after the silos are removed, the profundity of our wisdom teachers and scriptures, pathetically calling us, but not here, but calling us here, and in consensus, because Logos is unknown. And what if here we see all of many different human breakdowns and pathologies in their lists and fragmented glimpses of political breakdown and dysfunction, and breakdown in families and human relations and parenting, and breakdown in the internal psyche of people desperately seeking to find themselves in all the wrong places. You're looking for love in all the wrong places. You're looking for relationship and intimacy. You're looking for worship and God. You're looking for yourself. You're looking for meaning and value and overcoming a terminal death in all the wrong places. Looking for self, looking for meaning, looking for life, looking for longevity. Not long or short longevity, but life in all the wrong places. And we have a new possibility to unleash the medical power of our great wisdom and scriptures seen in the autumn light of the Logos, baby science, that the infinite is infinitely unobservable. That's the fabric of reality. So thank you. I hope I'm not putting you off by seeking to speak from outside of where we normally speak and to see why this story cannot be told. The greatest story, which is Logos is real, cannot be rendered and told in this form of telling. We need a deeper form of narratology in order to speak and reveal it, and that's really what I'm seeking. That was what my life was really in quest of the missing Logos code, and to open up the deeper global light, the global spectrum. This is the global space, the global lens. The postmodern culture is saying, no, there is no such. There is no eyes of God. No, it's the eyes of man, the human, the person, eyes of the woman, right? The lens, rich software. So in a way, postmodern narrative is already embedded within the narrative of self-deconstruction. And even that logic is saying all narratives can be deconstructed, including my own. Here, yes. And that's right, because great thinkers like Nagarjuna saw that all of this can be deconstructed. It's a construct. But this is not a construct. This is the ground floor. That's what Descartes was after, for example. And what Jesus was alleging and sacrifice for that. And Socrates is saying, leave the cave and come. All of that. I won't go on. So thank you for staying with me in this. And what I'll do next in the sequel, I think I need two different sequels. One is show from source medical ontology, ontological pathologies, and ontological breakdown from a deeper diagnostic space to see in a human condition, in the conflation, age of conflation, how do we understand the wide range of human failings in the person, in interpersonal relations, in intercultural relations, in political life, in medical life, in our relations with nature. Every aspect of culture is fragmented and compromised. We need a higher form of culture, a higher form of discourse and primary being in order to rise to the culture of nirvana, the culture of health, the culture of nonviolence, because there's intrinsic violence here, which is this. To be embedded within the space is intrinsically to be turning the back on the source, of your life. And the call of the first is to honor the first as first. And that echoes across the ages. So I can see now two different sequels. The next one I'll talk about, let's look at all of the diverse pathologies in some depth in this context, and to see what would be the prescription to overcome the nihilism, the opinionism, the postmodern fragmentation, that there is no foundation or ground, the breakdown of democracy, the failure of dialogue, the I-thou place, from monologue to dialogue, and so forth. So we need to look at all the different reasons why objectification generates all these forms of sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, demonizing the other, objectifying the other, and not really seeing the sacredness of the other in the deepest space. So that's the next one. Let's go in depth into the human pathologies seen from the eyes of the source science, medical ontology, an ontological understanding of illness and breakdown in the culture, where culture itself can be ill-being. There cannot be well-being if you're eclipsed from being. And to get well-being, you need the language of being, the language of presence. And then another sequel that would be helpful to this prospective reviewer is to take a moment in one session to run through across the planet the lineages of all of the great diverse first scriptures and narratives to show why they were pointing to seeing this and how I learned from them. And I couldn't see this without our great scriptures and first philosophies. And I'll, in another sequel, talk about what were the greatest moments in our 2,500 years of our wisdom keepers and teachers and scientists and first responders that would lead to an understanding of the unum pluribus principle and the source science breakthrough and the end of the age of conflation. Thanks for listening. Great to be with you.